Welcome to Eduimagica, the medical mystery education hub. Now let's begin our second video under the series of blood clotting, clotting factors, and coagulation cascade. So today we will learn about clotting factors. Before watching this video, make sure that you have watched a previous video on blood, hemostasis, and coagulation. Link is in description below. So now let's start with clotting factors. Clotting factors are proteins, except the factor number 4, within the clotting cascade necessary to form cross-linked fibrin. They were numbered in order they were discovered. Calcium is factor 4, which is a critical cofactor in the activation of many of the proteins. These are main 13 clotting factors that help in the clotting of the blood, but actually there are only 12 factors because the factor number 6 is missing, because earlier the activated form of the factor number 5, that is 5A, was known as factor number 6. So now let's start about learning about clotting factors. The factor number 1 is known as Fibrinogen. The source for the factor number 1 is liver. So all those diseases which affect the functioning of liver decreases the concentration of fibrinogen in the plasma, which will subsequently affect the coagulation pathway. So talking about the next, factor number 2. The factor number 2 is known as the prothrombin, and the source for the factor number 2 is liver. The prothrombin is alpha-2 globulin. Its plasma concentration is approximately 15 mg per deciliter, and this is one of the most important plasma protein involved in coagulation cascade. Prothrombin splits into a number of small proteins, and one of the most important protein is the thrombin, which converts fibrinogen to fibrin. Now let's talk about the factor number 3, that is known as thromboplastin or the tissue factor. The source for the thromboplastin or the tissue factor is platelets or the endothelium. This factor is involved in the initiation of the intrinsic pathway. Whenever there is trauma to the blood vessel, the factor number 3 is released, which starts the intrinsic pathway. Now let's talk about the factor number 4. Factor number 4 is known as calcium. Calcium is the most important ion involved in coagulation cascade. It is involved in almost all reactions of intrinsic and the extrinsic pathway. That is why calcium is numbered as the most important. The source for the calcium is bones and GIT absorption. The factor number 5. The factor number 5 is also known as proaxillarine or the liable factor. The source for this factor number 5 is liver and platelets. The factor number 7. The factor number 7 is known as proconvertin, or also known as serum prothrombin conversion accelerator. The source for the factor number 7 is liver. Now moving on to the next factor, the factor number 8. The factor number 8 is known as the anti-hemophilic factor A. The source for the factor number 8 is endothelium, and the deficiency of factor number 8 results in classic hemophilia. Moving on to the next, the factor number 9. The factor number 9 is also known as anti-hemophilic factor B or the Christmas factor. The source for the factor number 9 is liver. Now moving on to the next, the factor number 10. The factor number 10 is Stewart factor. The source for the Stewart factor or the factor number 10 is liver. Now moving on to the next factor, the factor number 11. The factor number 11 is known as the anti-hemophilic factor C or the plasma thromboplastin antecedent. The source for the anti-hemophilic factor C is liver. Now moving on to the next factor, the factor number 12. The factor number 12 is also known as anti-hemophilic factor D or the Higman factor. The source for this factor number 12 is also liver. Now the factor number 13. The factor number 13 is known as the fibrin stabilizing factor. This factor stabilizes the fibrin monomer that are formed after the fibrinogen is converted to fibrin because initially they were not bonded strongly. So this factor helps in formation of strong covalent bond between the fibrin monomers. So now let me give you a trick to remember clotting factors. It is foolish people try climbing long slopes after Christmas. Some people have fallen. So here the foolish stands for the fibrinogen, the people stands for the prothrombin, tri stands for tissue factor, climbing for calcium, long for liable factor, slopes for serum prothrombin conversion accelerator, after for AHFA, Christmas for Christmas factor, some for Stewart factor, people for plasma thromboplastin, have for Hagman, and fallen for fibrin stabilizing factor. This was all about the clotting factors. Thank you for watching a video on the clotting factors. Make sure to follow us on different social media platforms and don't miss to like the video and hit the subscribe button.